the one that earning 14% is a Brazilian operation. It's a community solar operation. It's active now, and they're expanding it. So basically, I can come up with $100. You can start with $100. Put $100 down, and then from that point on, every month, I get a distribution. Basically based on how much money on the fact that solar plant is generating revenue. And it comes every month. And now I personally would reinvest it, because even if you put $100, it's not a ton of money. So just reinvest it. If you put $100, and you can even do it monthly. So if you do $100 monthly, by the time the period of the investment cycle is done. So you start now and say it ends in 18 years. You're gonna have close to $100,000 based on just $100.
Yeah, it's not gonna really hit your wallet that hard, because
it's not.
It's a little bit each month.
And and some people, I know some people have more money. They'll put in $1,000 a month. You put in $1,000 a month over the course of 15 to 20 years. I mean, you do 20 years, you're close to $1 million.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Angel Research Podcast. I am Jason Williams, not Freert or Stutman. I'm the managing editor of Wealth Daily, one of our free publications, and with me today I have the illustrious Jeff Siegel.
Illustrious.
Jeff, the illustrious. I like that one. I used that yesterday in a tweet.
You did. I saw that. Thank you for that.
Of course, man. Of course. Jeff is another one of our editors here. He's an investment analyst, and he runs an investment service called Green Chip Stocks. And you can probably guess by the name that Green Chip Stocks is sort of about investing in things that do good for the environment, the planet, society, while also making some money for yourself on the side. And I don't think anybody can argue with that.
Oh, people argue with me about that all the time.
Oh, do they? Yeah, I'm sure they do.
It depends. I mean, I've gone to conferences where it's an environmental conference and someone will say something like, why does it have to be about money? And I'm just like, okay, do you work for free? Kind of thing.
Valid point.
And then there's the other side of it too, where people are just so invested in this idea that if anything related to the environment is bad for business, which is clearly not the case.
Oh, definitely.
And so it's I can't win, really.
It's tough. Kind of, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Yeah.
There. It's that catch-22. Like, well, why does it have to be about money if it's about the environment? Well, why does it have to be about the environment at all?
Yeah, right. I know, it's crazy, right? Well, it was funny because I remember that this woman that asked me about that was a solar conference, and this was years ago. We're talking about this new solar cell technology. It was going to, it's more efficient, and it could be produced much cheaper than the way we had produced conventional solar cells. It was just a really fascinating topic, and we were talking about how the company was actively doing a raise because they had to expand their manufacturing capabilities.
Right.
And this woman's just like, I just don't understand. We're trying to clean up the planet. Why does it have to be about money? Why can't we just do this? And in my head, I'm just like, well, who's we? Like, who are you going to donate to this? Do you know how many donations you would need to make this happen? And that's not really a viable business proposition. It's like
definitely.
Everything, even. It's very easy for someone to look at all the bad things that happen in the world and say, well, it's because it's capitalism. Like, capitalism, provides us with medicine and food and clean water. It's like, but I think people are so embedded in this idea that, you can't be a capitalist and an environmentalist at the same time, which I've proven time and time again is not true.
Right.
Yet still to this day, you should see some of the tweets I get from people. Very mean tweets.
Oh, very mean tweets, man. People get really mean on the internet. It's that anonymity.
Yeah.
It's like those before it was so social media was so widespread. I used to call them telephone tough guys.
Yeah.
We had a bunch of those at Morgan Stanley, man. Yell at you over the phone, and then when you see them in person, they're like, "Oh, hey, how's it going? Good to see you." Definitely internet tough guys out there.
Yeah, too many of them.
But I mean, and you've proved this wrong time and time again with investments like Tesla. I mean, shoot, Tesla's made people tons of money. It's also helped reduce the number of internal combustion vehicles out there on the road by millions. There's millions of Teslas out there now.
And it's so crazy because when Tesla first came out, there were a lot of people on the left and a lot of environmentalists that loved Elon Musk, right? And he's like, oh, he's doing all this great stuff. And now they hate him because he's rich or he says stuff that they don't like.
Uh-huh.
But I'm like, you do realize if it wasn't for him, there would be no electric cars on the road today.
Oh, for
like
sure.
he launched this whole
Yeah,
thing.
the entire industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. You
So
can
it's kind
definitely
of
say
like,
that.
what do you want? I mean, you're not going to agree with everyone all the time.
Yeah.
But if he is making, if he is providing a new form of personal transportation that is making, the air cleaner and the water cleaner, it's like, why? Okay, maybe he said some stuff you don't like, but that doesn't change like his impact on the environment.
Right. No,
It's-
definitely
Why
not.
can't we? I don't understand. Like he certainly tweeted things. I'm like, dude, that was kind of messed up. But it doesn't mean that takes away from all the great things he's done.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't know. I feel like both of us come from an era where you could disagree with somebody and still agree with them. You know,
Right,
like you could
right.
disagree with them on one thing and agree with them on something else.
Yeah.
And debate was a good thing, and you could learn stuff from people that maybe had different opinions or views than you did. But it seems like we're kind of getting away from that. Hopefully, we can get back to it.
Well, it's interesting because I remember when I was young, when I was in college, I was I've always been a pretty liberal guy, but I was a hardcore Democrat, when I was in college and just learning about politics and policy. And then as I got older, I really started to see like, okay, like there's a lot of problems with both parties, and I'm not sure I really like what's happening on either side. And just through my own, I don't know, like interest in education and just researching things and seeing the world and kind of coming to my own conclusions, saying, okay, well, maybe I'm not particularly happy with what happened under the Clinton administration. At the time, I guess I didn't know any better,
Right.
And then as I got older, I realized, okay, this wasn't such a good thing. And it can happen on the Republican side too. But yeah, it's like I feel like I don't know if I was growing up today, would it be the same? Would I be in a situation where there's so much vitriol that would I fall victim to it and play along, or would I fight it? I really honestly don't know. But yeah, growing up, there was always that honest debate. I would debate people all the time, and it was never mean-spirited.
Yep. Yeah. No, definitely. I definitely understand. I try and do it here and there, but it usually ends up into me getting called names and then deciding that this just isn't worth it.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people do that, and it ends up in like self-censorship and things like that, where you're just like, I'm just not going to say this because I don't want to have this argument.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. It's definitely a shame. But we're sort of getting off topic. I
Yeah.
wanted to talk with you, I've got you like the green stock expert, the alternative energy expert, and that's really what I wanted to talk with you today about is alternative energy, because you've been, you've been a big voice, a big supporter of that, from the very get-go pretty much, and have made a lot of money, or helped your subscribers make a lot of money, have made a lot of money yourself by making these kinds of investments, and we're definitely seeing a divergence from traditional energy generation methods, using oil and coal and natural gas, and while they still make up the vast majority of how we generate electricity, it's become more and more clear that the future is going to be a much more varied mix, with a lot more I guess a lot less dominance of fossil fuels. You know what I mean? They're probably still going to be part of the mix.
Sure.
They're great. They're in a lot of cases cheap. So that's good for developing countries. But in like Western countries, we're already seeing where solar, more new solar's coming on than coal, and like solar's providing more power than coal. And coal, I live in West Virginia now, and coal provides 80% of the power for West Virginia.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting, right? Because like 1 or 2 years ago, it provided 100% of the power. So while people may give West Virginia some crap for like being 80% coal, it's made more progress than most states in the entire country.
In terms of the percentage,
in terms of the percentage that it's cut.
It's interesting to go back though. You mentioned something about in emerging economies and how like fossil fuels would play. I'm assuming like you're suggesting it'd be like a larger role because of the cost.
Right, the cost. Yeah.
And I'd push back against that a little bit in that it's actually it depends on where you are in which. So like to give you an example, in Africa. Africa's a massive continent. We have seen that solar and storage and wind is actually cheaper to integrate, not either into a grid, or they have you see more microgrids now in Africa. Because one of the main reasons for that is you don't have to transport the resource.
Right.
And because solar and wind have the manufacturing costs of those and installation costs have dropped so dramatically, we're now at a place where it's pretty even. And again, if you're in the right climate, it's superior to fossil fuels.
Right. Definitely.
But that has come up in a lot of recent discussions I've had with people that are saying, well, India is taking all this oil from Russia. That doesn't discount the cost advantages of let's say, well, oil's not, because oil's a transportation fuel, so it's not really right to compare that to utility scale power. But that doesn't mean that India is not pursuing more renewable energy integration, which it absolutely is.
Right.
I think it will be a consistent mix for the foreseeable future. But coal is going to continue to lose a lot of market share, and natural gas, from the data I've seen, is pretty much has peaked or will peak before the end of the decade. That doesn't mean it's going away, but again, because it is becoming so cheap to use solar and to use wind and to use battery storage, that the idea of having baseload power it's not going to be as concerning in 20 years because we do have storage,
right?
And because we do have smart technology that allows you to deploy solar at a certain time, or wind at a certain time, or natural gas at a certain time. So storage or baseload power, it's for now, obviously it's still part of what we do and we need it. But the trajectory that we're looking at, and we'll be old. We'll be so old when this happens. But eventually it's going to be primarily solar, wind, nuclear storage, and probably some other things too peppered in there. Lots of new efficiency and conservation measures that will not require us to produce as much power, because we're using it in a more efficient way.
Right.
So yeah, we're in a weird place right now.
It really is. It really is. One of the companies that we invested in my microcap investing service, Future Giants, they have what I've been calling the Newton battery, which is like a gravity energy storage system, and it works very similar to hydropower, or more similarly to pumped hydro. Which pumped hydro, for anybody out there that isn't familiar with it, is basically you have a reservoir at the bottom of a hill and a reservoir at the top of a hill. When you generate energy, you use that energy to pump the water up to the top. When you need the energy, you release it through turbines and it flows down to the bottom. You use gravity. Nobody's got a monopoly on gravity, but there are places, like you said, location is important, where there isn't access to liquid water. Where it's really cold, the water freezes. Where it's really dry, there just isn't water that you can use for that. So this company basically figured out a way to use weights instead of water.
Right.
But one of what I'm seeing as we continue to follow this company is one of their most popular offerings, and maybe even more popular than this gravity energy storage system, is the technology that they have developed that helps you more efficiently deploy the energy that you've stored. And sort of like, okay, like now it's time to switch to the natural gas. Nope, now we need to pump this solar energy onto the grid. And they've been getting lots and lots of partnerships for that. So it's like you said, it's the efficiency of how we use the energy versus how we used to use it, and just get it out there.
Yeah, I love that you've been writing about the Newton battery, because it is so superior to what we use today in terms of storage. And I've always kind of boggled my mind that we didn't see it sooner, because it's not like the technology, we needed like some kind of special new technology to make it happen.
No, pumped hydro has been around for decades, maybe even centuries.
Oh, absolutely. So, but the great thing about the Newton battery is like, or would you call it Newton battery or storage?
I call it the Newton battery.
Newton battery, okay.
Yeah, but I mean, it's basically it's not really technically a battery. It's
but that's
energy storage
that's the important thing, right? Because and I listen, stationary batteries are going to be a huge part of our grid and our energy economy going forward, but they still require massive amounts of resources where the Newton battery doesn't need that.
Right.
It's a very significant cost advantage.
Yeah.
Which I'm really excited to see kind of the expansion of this model.
Yeah, one of the things I thought was really cool about it, and actually something that I was talking about at the marina where I keep my boat the other weekend, is that there's a marina right down the river where, basically if you have a derelict boat, something that maybe sunk, and you raised it back up, and it's covered with barnacles, it's everything's been inundated by water, you just can't fix this boat.
Right.
They can take this boat and they have this huge grinder and they can run it through a fiberglass grinder, grind it all up, and then that stuff goes into building products and helps to provide filler for like concrete and things like that. And that's something that they do with the Newton battery. You don't have to use any particular thing, you just have to have something heavy. So say your wind turbine's been up for like 20 or 30 years and it needs to be replaced. Well, you can take that wind turbine and sort of crush it up and make a Newton battery out of it.
Yeah.
And it's just really cool, and I thought that was awesome. I love the my neighbor called it upcycling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's very it's becoming more common. I think that particularly for people that are environmentally conscious and they think about these things, that's also an advantage of Newton battery too, is because, again, not just the cost factor that goes with having the resources for batteries, but mining, for cobalt or lithium or whatever it may be, even if it's done in the most responsible way, it still has an environmental burden that is much heavier than what you would find in the Newton battery.
Oh, very true.
Do you think that's gonna? I'm just curious what your thoughts on that, because I'm just wondering if there are individual countries that are looking at it like, okay, we need to meet certain environmental goals. Is this going to help us? And maybe there's support on the policy level. Have you seen that at all?
I mean, I'm sure there is some of that. I'm seeing more, just the interest in the fact that, it's something different. It can be linked to this software that helps them, really deploy the energy more efficiently. But definitely it helps, when you count the carbon footprint outside of the immediate area,
right.
It definitely helps reduce that. And I know the Saudis want to use it. They're building this huge solar field. I think it's called the Gwar solar field or something like that. But it's going to be like the biggest solar field in the world. It's supposed to be able to generate enough power to power like 4.6 million homes.
Crazy.
And they want to use this to store the energy from it. And it's basically just this huge building with, these towers inside that the weights are stacked and
right.
lowered and stacked and lowered. But, really cool.
Well, it's also like, and I, again, we were talking about this earlier, getting hassled by some environmentalists. I often say that, we can consider carbon footprints, that's fine, but there's a lot more involved here. I mean, just overall it's pollution. So maybe if you utilize a stationary battery from a carbon footprint perspective, it's still probably going to be better than natural gas if you're using natural gas as a backup or storage.
Right.
But think about the damage you do to the soil, to the water when you mine for cobalt, for instance.
Definitely.
So again, we're looking at this Newton battery, and it's just like it's not just the carbon footprint, but it's also how is this better for our water, for our soil? I mean, arable land is a hot commodity these days because there's so little of it left.
Yeah.
So
they don't make any more of it either.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, you kind of can. We could. Obviously, you could. Soil can be replenished, but it takes centuries to do that. Yep. I live up near a bunch of farms, and I work with some local farmers. It's something I do for a hobby. And a lot of the farmers up there, they call themselves dirt farmers because they have to make sure that their soil is healthy.
Oh, yeah.
And this one farmer I know, he's just like, this land I have, he's like, I could never part with it because the soil is so healthy. And we the way he farms is in a regenerative way that soil is still very, very valuable, So, sometimes I think we're so quick to go right for the carbon footprint or the climate change angle, which is important, but pollution is pollution,
right? Right, definitely.
So as you can see, I'm a big fan of the Newton battery.
I appreciate that. Me too. I am. And one thing that it's really good for is storing the energy that's generated by things like wind farms and solar fields. because, as everybody likes to point out, the wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine. That's something that they told me when I first put a solar panel on my sailboat, was that, hey man, we've been out where we've gone a week without the sun, but the wind would blow.
Right.
And we've been out where we've been stuck in places where there was no wind, but there was lots of sun. You should have a turbine too. So they were sort of saying, but obviously, I have to have a battery bank for those things to charge so that when the sun's not shining, the wind's not blowing, and I want that energy, I can get to it.
Right.
And that's sort of where the Newton battery comes into play, is that like it can store that like you said, baseload power, or it's not really storing baseload power, it's storing that extra power so that it can supply when the base load runs out.
Right.
But that sort of ties into something that you recently shared with your readers, which was a way to invest in solar plants or solar fields, solar farms, and earn income from them. And I run an income-focused advisory service where that's literally all we're looking for is steady income streams, to help grow our portfolio, to reinvest, to live off of once we retire, and to find, it's a private company. I love private companies because you get to avoid the swings of the stock market.
Exactly.
That's, can be gut-wrenching, which we all went through in 2022. Now we're like, everybody's really excited because the market's going up, but then it can go down again. And the nice thing about these private companies is they get revalued when they're sold, and they're either sold, because they're so valuable that somebody wants to buy them, or they're just not sold, And I love the distributions. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a great deal because basically what it is, there's one company that operates a number of solar farms across the world, and they lock in a power purchase agreement with the local utility. So the utility comes along and says, okay, we're going to pay you X amount of dollars per kilowatt hour for the next 20 years. It's locked in. That's the rate that they pay. So the company says, okay, sounds good. This is what you're going to pay us. In order to either build, or in some cases they find older power plants that just need to be rebuilt, they spend the money to build them, rebuild them. If they have to be permitted, they do all of that. And then the way they do that is they find investors. Now, most of the people that invest in these solar power plants they're institutional. They're institutional money.
Right.
So they come in and say, okay, maybe they need $10 million to set up this new solar power plant. Well, institutional money will probably cover like $8 million. And then they open up the other $2 million through a crowdfunding platform for anybody. You don't have to be accredited.
Which
just
is
go
awesome,
through their
because
platform.
usually you have to be a millionaire already
Right.
to invest in these, money-making outfits.
And honestly, that's how it was for a long time. And then there's a change to an SEC rule that happened a few years ago that made it possible to do this. And so because they know how much money they're going to make over the next 15 to 20 years, they can say to the investor, okay, we know we're going to make this amount of money, so we can give you it's still an estimate, like an estimated internal rate of return of whatever, 8%, 10%, one's even 14%. So, I mean, you're essentially saying, okay, the one that earning 14% is a Brazilian operation. It's a community solar operation. It's active now, and they're expanding it. So basically, I can come up with $100. You can start with $100. Put $100 down, and then from that point on, every month, I get a distribution. Basically based on how much money on the fact that solar plant is generating revenue. And it comes every month. And now I personally would reinvest it, because even if you put $100, it's not a ton of money. So just reinvest it. If you put $100, and you can even do it monthly. So if you do $100 monthly, by the time the period of the investment cycle is done, so you start now and say it ends in 18 years. You're gonna have close to $100,000 based on just $100.
Yeah, it's not gonna really hit your wallet that hard, because
it's not.
It's a little bit each month.
And and some people, I know some people have more money. They'll put in $1,000 a month. You put in $1,000 a month. Over the course of 15 to 20 years. I mean, you do 20 years, you're close to $1 million.
And you've been collecting income off that every single time.
Every
and if you're
time.
reinvesting that, then you're just capitalizing on that compound interest there.
It's just, I love stuff like that because obviously I'm a big solar fan, but there's the safety mechanism that I really like. I'm no, like you said, no matter what happens in the stock market, I'm still getting my check.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and
And
really,
then at
that's how these guys make money. Like when we talk about like Elon Musk or Warren Buffett or Jeff Bezos, like yeah, they all like. Elon Musk has Tesla and SpaceX and Jeff Bezos has Amazon. Clearly, like that's where their fortunes were built.
Right.
But they make a ton of money because they can go in and be like, okay, I'm going to put 10 million into this operation. And for the next 20 years, I'm going to earn, 10, 12, 14% on that. And it's just every month more money comes in. Obviously, we may not have 10, 12 million dollars to invest in an operation, but it's the same mechanism.
Yep.
And I don't think a lot of people get that. It's like we look at Elon Musk, like the richest guy in the world. He made all this money in Tesla. Well, yeah, he made a lot of money in Tesla, but just to remind you, every month he's getting a check from this utility company that, because he invested in that project, which is wind, solar, natural gas, whatever it may be, he's getting that check. Mm-hmm. Well, now you can do it too.
That's awesome.
I love
That's
it.
great.
Yeah.
And you look at it, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos might not be, they're great examples because they are, some of the richest people in the world. But you've got a guy like Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett never founded a company himself. He bought Berkshire Hathaway. I think it was like a furniture company, and he kind of bought it. If I'm remembering correct, I could be wrong about this, so don't quote me, anybody. But
I'm sure everyone will leave very mean tweets if you do.
If I am wrong, definitely let me know in the comments section. But he bought it sort of as like an FU, where he wanted to invest in this company, and they were like, "We don't want your money." So once he had enough money, he basically like bought the company and was like, "Screw you guys! You're not a furniture company anymore. You're an insurance company."
I love that.
And everybody wants to have that. It's like that FU money.
Yeah.
And what good is it if every once in a while you don't say FU? But Warren Buffett, he's made his money by investing in companies, and the majority of the companies that he invests in spin off income. And all the guys on Shark Tank, we'll talk about I make money by starting private companies and things, but when I invest in a stock, I want it to pay me.
Right.
I don't want to have to just hope that the price goes up. I want to know that I'm getting paid, and that's exactly what you found here.
Especially now.
Yeah.
I mean, you know how it is. It's so fun. You may get this too. Like people always ask me, like, "What's going on in the market?" I'm like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
How could I possibly know what's going on?
Yeah.
Like it's all a mirage. It's all an illusion. There's no safety. It's like you could do really well. I mean, we've both done very well. But that doesn't mean there haven't been bumps along the way.
Oh, yeah,
I've
definitely had some stinkers too.
Yeah.
I've had some great ones.
Yeah,
I've had ones that I'm just like,
too.
oh man, I'd really like to pretend that never happened.
Yeah, I know. So isn't it nice to know? You say, okay, even though I screwed up with this one, next month I'm getting my dividend check.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It's okay.
Yeah.
No, definitely. I love that stuff, and I love the income. I love the fact that this is a private company. I think I said this to my subscribers a while ago because I was sharing it with them.
Okay.
And I was like, I'm kind of jealous that he found it and I didn't. But I'm not jealous enough that I'm not going to participate in it myself, and I'm certainly not jealous enough to not share it with people too,
Right.
because it's just such a great investment.
Yeah.
It's such a great thing, and I don't care what whoever's listening, what your thoughts are on what causes climate change, what is pollution, what's not pollution. I mean, if you stand over any fire, and inhale, it doesn't feel good. So you got to figure that can't be good for the planet either.
Right.
So it's one of those things where whether you think that that climate change is caused by human activity or not, you go out, you see all the plastic laying around on the side of the road, or
Right.
In my case, the side of the river when I go out on the boat or the kayaks. That's not good. That's not pretty. Nobody likes that.
Yeah, nobody wants
so
that.
I mean, cleaning up the planet, is good for everybody there. And figuring out ways to do things better is
Right.
good for everybody. And you've shown time and time and time again that it can be really good for your bank account too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's funny now because when I think about solar and wind in particular, when I first started writing about it, it was definitely had that environmental angle to it.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's so even the idea of alternative energy. I don't even use the word alternative energy because it's not alternative anymore.
Right.
It's such a huge part of our energy economy. So there are so many people now that have been energy investors for decades,
Mm-hmm.
and they made tons of money in oil and gas or coal or nuclear. And they're all in solar, wind, storage, all of that, because it's not it's not like, hey, this is good for the planet. It's like, hey, this is good for my portfolio.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, definitely.
Which
definitely.
obviously, again, like I'm a self-proclaimed tree hugger. Like I make no apologies for being an environmentalist. But you have to be pragmatic too, and it's just very interesting to see when I first started writing about this how much pushback there was, and the people that push back, they're all in solar and wind and all these other things now.
Oh, definitely.
Because it's just like I said, it's just you cannot have an energy portfolio that's absent solar, wind, storage. You can't.
No, you got to be diversified,
Yeah.
know, and why cut yourself out of potential profits?
Yeah.
I mean, especially with all the money that goes towards that stuff. I mean, you see private money, billions and billions of dollars in private money, hundreds of $1 billions in, public funding,
Right.
tax breaks, subsidies and things like that. I mean, it's something that we say a lot, in investing that like, you shouldn't fight the trend.
Right, exactly.
You know?
Well, it's funny you bring that up. I think it was Bloomberg that put this data out. I'm not sure, but it may have been Bloomberg. So this year, and this blew me away when I saw this. This year, every day $1 billion will be invested in solar.
Wow. For those of you who are unfamiliar with how many days are in a year, that's $365 billion this year alone.
This year.
That is mind-boggling.
That just blows me away.
Yeah,
it's like $1 billion, not $1 million. $1 billion.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Every single day.
I'd take $1 billion a day.
Hell yeah. I'd take it just once.
Yeah, right. If I take it just once, you guys will never hear me on this podcast. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'll totally come back and do this podcast.
Well, but that's the thing. It's like you think about $1 billion a day. It's like even if you don't understand solar, or if you don't, even if you look at solar like it's just some kind of environmental thing. It's like if there's $1 billion a day being invested, and it's not $1 billion from retail investors.
Mm-hmm.
These are funds. These are
Yeah.
family offices.
Yeah.
These are the Elon Musks and Jeff Bezos of the world.
Right.
Listen, I've done very well for myself, but I'm not anywhere near as smart as a Warren Buffett or a Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. So if they're doing it, I'm like, oh, that must be a good idea.
Right. That is definitely, you want to follow the guys that know what they're doing, and who have proven that they know what they're doing over and over again.
Yeah.
And it's worked out really well for you. It's worked out well for your readers too. It's worked out pretty well for me so far.
Yeah.
But it's just that's a mind-boggling number, $1 billion a day. I mean, is there any other industry in the world that's getting that kind of funding? And I really
So
don't
oil
think...
and gas had for a very long time, and I think this is the first year that renewable energy, not just solar, but renewable energy will exceed that of oil and gas in terms of investment. This is the first year that's happening.
That's impressive.
But I don't really like to do those comparisons too much because, like gas, you can say, okay, gas is utility scale power, that's fine, but oil, it's transportation fuel.
Right.
So it never made sense to me to say we're gonna compare solar or wind to oil because it's just two different animals.
Right, it definitely is. It definitely is. I mean, you're absolutely right that it's a transportation fuel, and the natural gas always sort of gets lumped in there because it's often a byproduct of oil production.
Right.
And for a long time, people used to just flare that stuff off. They were like, "Oh God, we got more natural gas coming up. Just spark the lighter, flare that stuff off, get rid of it. We don't need it." It is. It's really crazy. You think about all of the energy that was wasted and all of the, because it has led to a lot of greenhouse gas reduction. Switching from coal to natural gas, and we're gonna continue that pattern going forward where more coal plants come offline, but instead of being replaced solely by natural gas plants, being replaced by wind farms and by solar fields and by big energy storage systems, either battery energy storage or stuff like the Newton battery, pumped hydropower. In general,
Hydro's tough now because of all these extreme weather events are happening,
the droughts and things. Yeah,
it's making it very difficult for hydro and also for nuclear because obviously nuclear is always situated near like a body of water, ocean or a river or something. Except I think in Arizona they cool. I could be wrong, but I think they cool it with from a sewage treatment plant, which is actually very smart.
That is.
But yeah, so lack of water is also an issue because you need water for power plants. You need it for natural gas. You need it for coal, and you need it for nuclear. you need a small amount for solar and wind. Not nearly as much as you would need for coal, for instance, or nuclear. So that's another advantage as we acclimate to kind of the new normal of these extreme weather events.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is why I guess, in like you were saying, in certain locations in like places like Africa, why, solar and wind are such, a much more viable option because, you get into, north of the Sahara or, northern Africa and it's basically a desert, it's very dry, there's a lot of wind. You can see that from like dust storms and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's perfect there, but you don't have a lot of water, so it's tough to do the coal, it's tough to do the nuclear, it's tough to do the oil, or I mean the gas. We shouldn't say the oil.
Right. And I've always thought that the distribution of these resources was always something that didn't get enough attention. Say, okay, well maybe it costs X amount of dollars to produce natural gas, but you still have to move it.
Right. Either it has to go in a tanker truck or a tanker ship, or through pipelines, and you have to build those pipelines, and you have to build roads for the vehicles. You have to build canals, dig canals for the ships.
Right.
So there's a lot of other stuff that goes into it. Whereas this is put it there and then use it.
There was an analysis done back in the late '90s about oil and what the not just externalized costs, but they figured into the equation. One of those things was distribution and the protection of shipping lanes.
Oh yeah.
So what it cost the U.S. Navy to protect shipping lanes, and when they did when they came to the dollar amount, they said, okay, if you figure all this into the equation, and it was very meticulous the way they did. I mean, they drilled down to everything. And I think it came to like the gas at the tank was going to cost you something like $16 or $17 a gallon. Wow. Because so many of those costs are, they're externalized or they're subsidized. So you're still paying it, right. But you don't realize you're paying.
Right. Yeah, we're definitely paying for the U.S. Navy, but we're not paying for it at the pump. We're paying for it, when we file our 1040s and things like that. And
that was one of my biggest arguments when people talk about electric cars versus internal combustion. It's like internal combustion, it's still cheaper. I'm like, technically, I don't think it is because if you do figure all those into the those elements in the equation, and let's say, for example, we had to pay $16 a gallon at the pump, there would be no money from the infrastructure deal going to electric cars because the market would have allowed electric cars to be the primary choice of transportation.
Oh yeah. When it makes that big of a difference.
Big, fan of letting the free market work. We obviously don't have a real free market because I would argue that if we did, we'd all be driving electric cars and have really nice public transportation as opposed to the dog shit that we have in this country.
Yeah, it would be nice.
And I'm sure you've been all over the world, right? I mean, you've seen how public transportation works in like Germany or Sweden or Switzerland. I mean, I remember being in Switzerland and the trains were so on time. If it said, okay, 2:05, like when it hit 2:05, the train would be coming in.
It was pulling in, yeah.
And you had 30 seconds to get on that thing. And if you weren't on it, it's gone.
Sorry, you're not messing with our schedule, pal.
No, exactly. In Japan, there was I think there was a guy about a year ago that one of the train driver, I don't call them drivers or conductors or whatever, lost his job because they were a few minutes late.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was like they're so serious about that shit. They're like, don't mess with this.
I lived in New York for a while. We wouldn't have any conductors in New York if that were the case, man. They were always late.
Yeah, I know, right?
Always.
She's always late, or sometimes it doesn't even show up.
Sometimes they would be so late that they would end up getting back on time. Where they were so late that the next train was supposed to be arriving when the first train finally got there, and I'm like, well, I guess technically you're now back on schedule.
So you were there for the 3:00 train, but it showed up at 3:30, but there's a 3:31 train.
Exactly.
So you're like, oh, sweet, so it's early.
Yeah, this one was early, I guess. No, it was actually late. It was really late. It was terrible. I remember there were definitely times there where I would be sitting there in the subway station and be like, man, is it worth waiting the 45 minutes that it might take for this train to get here, or should I just go pay $60 for a cab to get 20 blocks?
I do. I love the bikes in New York now.
Yeah,
those
the bikes
are the
are
best.
definitely nice.
And they have the electric ones
I
now
rode around
too.
A lot. Oh, really?
Yeah,
that's awesome. Because New York is hilly. I was always really sweaty when I got to places when I was riding my bike.
Well, it's also nice too with the electric ones because, especially when you're riding your bike down like around Penn Station, that area. Just really like people are just all over the place. So you have an electric bike. So if you see somebody coming, you can speed up a lot quicker. I think it's safer, you know. Because I mean, I love riding a bike in New York because it's so much easier than waiting for a train, and it's a lot cheaper than using, you know, an Uber or a taxi.
And you actually get to see stuff when you're, you know, on the bike, as opposed to like seeing the inside of the train and the, you know, the inside of the tunnels when you're on the subway, or, you know, basically the inside of the car when you're in the car.
I have to say though, there's being on a train in New York is also fun too.
Oh, totally.
I mean, if you're in the mood,
it took a long time for that novelty to wear off on me, where, you know, I would go down and get on the subway and be like, oh, this is so awesome, I love it.
Yeah. That's another talk for another day. But I always thought that public transportation was an interesting thing to talk about, because it does work so well in some parts of the world and not here. And the question is, why doesn't it work so well here? And there's a number. We could have time for that today.
Oh, yeah,
it would be an interesting conversation.
Hours about that. We definitely should. We should come back and do another podcast.
I would love that.
But we've already, you know, we've talked a bunch. And I know I can talk for hours, but there's only so long I can listen for. So I got to assume you guys out there are the same way. So, you know, let's you know, end this for today. And Jeff, thank you so much for coming on. We're going to put some links down in the description below the video. And below the audio, so that you can click on them. You can learn more about Jeff's private solar royalties. You can learn a little bit more about My Newton battery. You can learn more about both of us and our experience. And you know, please, if you enjoyed the video, if you enjoyed the podcast, subscribe to our channel. Like the video, like the podcast. Drop some comments if you have questions, things you'd like us to address on a future one.
I would love that.
If I was wrong about Warren Buffett, definitely let me know. I do, you know, I'm open to hearing when I was wrong. I don't like hearing when I was wrong. You know, I don't think anybody does, but you know, I don't want to continue to be wrong.
Listen,
so
if
entertain it.
If I said something that you think I'm way off base, leave it. I mean, leave it in the comments. Don't be a dick about it, but just be like, you know, just say, hey, listen, you know, I think you're not accurate on your thoughts about, you know, the cost of oil, you know, or whatever it may be. Like, let's have a reasonable conversation. I love that stuff.
Yeah, it would be great. We can address it on another podcast.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe somebody's got like some really good insights, and we can invite them in, you know, to be with us on here.
I would love that.
So, Jeff, thank you again for being here. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And just one more reminder, you know, subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell to get notified of when we post new content. And if you've got any questions, comments, opposing points of view, drop us a comment. Just as Jeff said, don't be a dick about it. You know, we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to you know, continue the conversation and maybe even have a little bit of a lively debate.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, cool.
Awesome.
Well, thanks again. Thanks everybody for listening. Take care.